Hello and welcome to Rubyvale Road. It's Alexandra and I am so excited to share with you how to sew this really easy linen dress. So I've made mine in this gorgeous bright green so I can look like a literal Christmas tree come this Christmas day. But of course you can make this dress in any colour for just as an easy summer dress. But if you want to follow suit with the Christmas inspiration, then go ahead and make it in a festive colour. It is perfect for Christmas Day because there's heaps of room so we can eat and enjoy ourselves as much as we like without having any uncomfortable feelings. And of course here in Australia and the Southern Hemisphere we have a hot summer Christmas, so I think this dress is perfect to keep nice and easy and cool for whatever you might be doing come this Christmas Day. So let's get cracking. Of course, first of all, we are going to need to take some measurements. We're only going to need 3 measurements to draft our pattern though, so we're just first of all going to need our bust. So just wrap your tape measure around your bust and measure right there in the center between your boobs, whatever that measurement is. And then we're going to measure our hips, so make sure you wrap that tape measure nice and straight around the widest part of your bum and take that measurement there too. And then thirdly, we're just going to need the length, which is just going to be like for the body of the dress, so it's not going to include the ruffles. Don't worry, we're not making a super short dress here. So we're just going to measure from the upper bust, which is just above, like, I would say where your strap sort of meets your bra, and then measuring down to that hip line, so where you measured your hips, so again the widest part of your hips. So taking a nice big piece of paper, I'm using some old Christmas wrapping paper, you know, totally on brand, on theme here. We're going to first of all rule out the length. So that was the measurement that we took from the upper bust down to the hips. And then we add 6 centimeters to that length so that we have allowed for seam allowance and hem allowance. So I've lined this up with the edge of the paper so then I can rule out 1.5 centimeters just so we can add that extra seam allowance on there. And then I've just connected all the dots so it's a nice straight line, despite my camera being on a complete angle and nothing looks straight. I'm so sorry about that. Next we can measure out our top width, so this is going to be our bust measurement plus 20 centimeters and then divide it by 4 and then add 1.5 centimeters for seam allowance. And then use a ruler to rule out a nice straight line. And then after that we can rule out our lower width, which is going to be our hip measurement plus 30 centimeters and then divided by 4 and then add on the 1.5 centimeters for seam allowance. Again, measure it out with your tape measure and then use a ruler to make a nice straight line. So lastly, for our pattern, we just need to take our tape measure and connect the end of the top line with the end of the bottom line and make a nice straight, slightly diagonal so that they're all connected, and we've sort of got like half a trapeze, is that the shape, or half a trapezoid? I can't remember what the name of that shape is. But there you have it. That is our pattern, and that will be for the front and the back. The back we cut on the fold, so that's going to be that line that we've ruled in 1.5 centimeters in from the edge of the wrapping paper. So the front we're going to have to cut 2, and we'll cut that with the raw edge of that paper pattern. So there we have it. We have one back piece cut on the fold, and then we've got our 2 front pieces cut separately with that added extra 1.5 centimeter for seam allowance down the front. So the other pattern pieces that we're going to need are all going to be rectangles. So to make that super easy, rather than making pattern pieces, I just used my tape measure and chalk and measured them all out onto my fabric. But instead I've just made graphics with the measurements of what you need to do to calculate the width and length of your rectangles. So you're going to have a small ruffle, a big ruffle, 4 straps and 2 ties. I made the width of my big ruffle 33 centimeters, but if you want to measure from your hip down to your desired finished length, then of course go ahead and do that if you want it a bit longer. As for the straps, I did mine at 30 centimeters, but if you want a nice big bow, you can do those as longer, so probably up to about 50 centimeters. At the front, you'll need 2 ties to tie the dress up, and you'll also need some elastic. So I used 0.9 centimeter wide elastic, but I definitely recommend nothing wider than a centimeter or half an inch. And finally, it is time to start sewing. So as always, I like to start with all the annoying fiddly bits and get them out of the way. So first of all, we're going to fold the 2 ties in half lengthways, pin, and then stitch them down, and then we're going to turn them out the right way. So just stitch them down with like a foot width seam allowance for the thin ties, and then use a loop turner or a bobby pin. That is a great little tip I've learnt recently, is how to use a bobby pin to turn them out the right way. I am not going to lie though, I had such a frustrations trying to turn out these ties and even the straps. It just, I don't know, I think the fabric is just so stiff and thick, it just wasn't super easy to turn them out the right way. But then we're going to do the same on the 4 straps, so of course folding them in half and pinning them down lengthways and stitching those together. And before we turn those ones out though, we're going to cut them down, just cut the seam allowance down, because I think I kept like a 1 centimeter seam allowance when I did the straps, so just cut the seam allowance like in half, so it's just 0.5 centimeters before you turn them out the right way. Hopefully make it a little bit easier. And we can leave all the straps and the 2 ties off to the side, and we'll get started on sewing the body of the dress. Taking the pieces of the body of the dress, we're firstly going to join the 2 front pieces to the back, sewing along the side seams. This is totally optional, of course. If you want to just do a zigzag stitch or an overlocking stitch to finish the seam, you can do that. I just decided to do French seams because it just gives a beautiful finish, especially working with linen, I think. So to do a French seam, firstly sew with the wrong sides facing together down each side seam, and then trim down the inside of the seam just to get rid of all those frayed edges, and then flip your fabric over so now that the right sides will be facing together, and resew the side seams, encasing the raw edges. And of course, as with any sewing project, make sure that you iron and press all your seams throughout, just to give everything a really good finish. Now for the center front seam, we're going to need to tidy up those raw edges, so if you can use a zigzag stitch or an overlocking stitch down the center seam of each front panel. Super lazy me didn't want to change my overlocker over onto black, so I just used white, but it's okay, it's all on the inside, it's fine. Now to sew the center front seam, we want to create a little split at the front, so we need to measure down from the top about 12 centimeters. If you want a bigger gap, then of course you can go down to maybe like 15 centimeters. So just measure down and mark with a pin, and then pin the rest of the seam down to the hem with the right sides of the fabric facing together, so that we know where to stitch, and we make sure that we don't go any higher than that pin pointing horizontally. Once you've stitched your seam, press it open nice and flat all the way to the top, so that you've pressed under the raw edges also at the opening which we've left. So now we're going to stitch a top stitch, so going from the top and then stitch across and then back up, so that we've got really neat little split at the top. So now we need to hem and create the elastic casing all the way around the top of the dress. For the hem, we're going to fold over 1 centimeter and then fold over 3.5 centimeters and pin it in place. So I just use my tape measure here and pins, and it seems to work okay. Also be mindful that because the dress is tapered, as you fold the top of it down, it is going to be a shorter circumference than what the body of the dress is. So if you find that it's not really connecting and whatnot, you can just make it like 3 centimeters along the top, if 3.5 is too much of a change in circumference from the top of the dress to lower part of the dress. So stitch that all in place, trying to line up as close as you can to that folded edge, so along where I've put those pins, you can see here that's where I stitched, just so that you've got enough room now to add our elastic casing. So to do this, just place your elastic on top and with the tape measure and work out just about how much you need for that elastic to sit comfortably and slide comfortably through the casing. So we're just going to do another row of stitching all the way along, so that there will be a sweet little ruffle above the elastic once it's threaded through. Then to finish off the body of the dress, we just need to hem it, so just fold up 1 centimeter and then fold up another 1 centimeter and stitch all the way round. Before we go into making the ruffles, just grab your tape measure and fabric chalk and just mark up 2 centimeters from the hem, and then mark up 10 centimeters from the hem, and mark all the way round with the chalk so that you've got 2 lines. This will make it a lot easier for when we have to sew the ruffles onto the body of the dress. Now to start making the ruffles. So if you're like me and you had to cut quite a few rectangles to get the right length so that you could gather it, so that there would be enough gathers. So first of all, you want to start by joining all of those rectangles together for both this small tier and the big tier. Then for the big tier, we're just going to hem one edge, so just fold over 1 centimeter and fold over another centimeter and stitch all the way round. Then for the skinny tier, we are going to hem both raw edges, so try to do as thin a hem as you can all the way around the bottom and the top. Once the thin ruffle is all hemmed, then we're going to add 2 rows of long straight stitching all the way around so that we can gather the ruffle. Be sure to leave nice long ties on your thread so that you can tug on these gently to gather the fabric. Then just try and gather the fabric as much as you need, so that it then fits the higher of the 2 chalk lines. So then we can then lay that ruffle onto the chalk line and pin and sew right in between the ruffle. So it'll be right in between your 2 gathering stitches, and just pin it all the way around in place before you stitch it. And there we have the first ruffle all sewn in place, and I think it looks really cute. Mind you, when I was editing this video, every time I saw the green dress with the ruffles, it kind of just reminds me of cabbage or something. Maybe Brussels sprouts. I don't know, some sort of green vegetable, that's for sure. Now to do the same with the big ruffle, sewing those 2 long straight stitches all the way around so that we can gather the fabric. And also I sewed my first row of gathering stitch in about 2 centimeters from the edge of the hem. Then pin the bottom ruffle onto the bottom chalked line, centering the chalk line in between the 2 rows of gathering stitches and pinning it all in place, so just even out the gathers till it all fits lovely, and stitch it in place, and that is pretty much the dress done. Lol, psych. No, we need to add the elastic around the top. So to measure the elastic, I just wrapped the elastic around my upper bust, so just sort of under my armpits, and then cut it. Then I've pinned a safety pin onto one end and threaded it all the way through the casing. Once you've threaded the elastic all the way through, it is a good idea to try it on in case you need to shorten the elastic and make it tighter just so it feels really comfortable. Then when it gets to the end, we're going to grab each tie and also pin the tie in place. Be really careful that you don't let go of the elastic, because I did, and then I had to try and get it back out. It was just so infuriating. So be very careful that you pin the tie and the elastic in place, and then top stitch over the top, reversing a few times just so it's really nice and strong and keeps the elastic and the tie sewn in place there at the top of the split. We're so close to the finish now, so again, just try the dress on and grab your straps and pin them in place as to where you want them to go. So I just tried it on, pinned the 2 straps in place at the front, tried to make sure that they were somewhat symmetrical, and then at the back I just tried it on and popped a pin in just on one side so that I could just make it symmetrical at the back for the other strap. And then to sew those on, you just want to stitch over the top stitching that you've already sewn for the casing of the elastic. Make sure you don't sew on the elastic, just on the top stitching of the casing of the elastic. Now for the very last step, so definitely try the dress on, tie the straps up, and just double check that you are happy with the length. And if you are, well then go ahead and hem it. So I just used a 1.5 centimeter fold and fold. So fold it up 1.5 centimeters and then fold it over another 1.5 centimeters and stitched all the way around, and it looks beautiful, and I'm so happy with this little dress. I can't wait to wear it on Christmas Day, and I think it's just so fun and so easy. Like, honestly, I know I said it, but it's really a very quick make. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave me a comment. Please give the video a big thumbs up. It would really mean the world to me. And subscribe to the Rubyvale Road YouTube channel for more sewing tutorials. Thank you so much, and of course, as always, best wishes on all your sewing adventures.